Dumelang, bonjour, and hello. My name is Thato Mazwe Madibo. I am the co-author alongside Dr. Marc Oosthuizen for our article paper named Reimagining Capitalism in Post-Apartheid South Africa, Elite Capture, Institutional Reform, and Inclusive Development, under the theme of Sustainable Development, hosted by the 21st International Conference on Sustainable Development by the University of Ottawa in Canada. There's no better way to start your presentation and introduction, as it were, without a quote. And here it is: apartheid's spatial and human capital legacies, shaped by biased education, health, and housing policies, created enduring inequalities that remain hard to reverse. Our big questions here to answer today are: can mission-driven capitalism break this cycle? Of 3 decades after apartheid, South Africa's inequalities remain the world's worst. But why? We'll analyze elite capture, policy failures, and the pathways to inclusive growth. Our problem statement: South Africa remains the world's most unequal country, with a Gini coefficient of 0.63%, according to the World Bank stats of 2023. Youth unemployment at a staggering 62.1%, mostly Black youth. BEE enriched a small elite, failed broader inclusion. Deep roots in apartheid's labor market and land ownership, and of course, education disparities. It is clear that inequalities within racial groups have not changed despite the end of apartheid. Within the post-apartheid era, there's been fairly minimal development and growth in these particular sectors. And it's clear in the graph behind me here that South Africa is lagging behind many of other SADC countries, such as Namibia, Botswana, Eswatini, and Lesotho. And the gap is only growing ever so bigger. Our GNI growth has slowly declined, but the decline is slow. We've seen a slight dip with 0.8%, but nevertheless, elite capture is the biggest wall and boundary for our growth. Historical context: apartheid shaped racial income gaps. Between 2008, Black incomes were only 13% in comparison to white counterparts. Clearly seen in this in the graph below, 2008 saw 297,000 per capita for white counterparts, where Black counterparts saw 9,790. That is a difference of 65,000 Rand in difference in income groups. Clear difference in terms of educational opportunities, healthcare, and clear availability to resources in that 65,000 Rand gap. And it just re-emphasizes the quote as mentioned: apartheid's spatial and human capital legacies are hard to reverse. Post-apartheid policy failures. Triple BEE delays with delays worth 1.5 trillion Rand between the years 2001 and 2023. But 3% of people captured only 80% of the whole nation's wealth. SOEs lost over 2 trillion Rand through mismanagement and misconduct. We've seen that previously with that of Eskom, SARS, even our postal services, and the current crisis with the South African Airways. Public infrastructure spending remains low at 15% of the budget, but nevertheless still sees glooming numbers of billions upon billions year in and year out, without physical development being seen by citizens. Economic power still concentrated in mining, banking, and energy sectors. racial stats of 9,790 Black Africans is still a crisis. Our comparative case study was that of South Africa and Rwanda. Rwanda's development state model is a clear one, with its focus on agro-processes, renewable energy, and clear mission-oriented investments in key areas of their sectors that see massive returns. But nevertheless, South Africa's extractive institutions, unshored public investment tools, example of that of the PIC's 3.4 trillion rand investment, still lacks material gains for the South African economy. Rwanda's GDP growth of 9.7% in 2024, but South Africa's GDP growth fell to 0.6% in 2023. This shows the lack of South African initiative when it comes to development of state matters. So Rwanda has seen massive gains in the coming decade, where South Africa has seen lowering in these specific sectors, such as the agricultural sector, dipping into 3.2%, mining, despite interests, going down by 1.6%. Also, to emphasize the point, South Africa being one of the largest exporters when it comes to the mining sector, still depleting at 1.6%. Economic stagnation in South Africa. Investment never reached the 30% GDP target as per the South African Reserve Bank forecast. Private sector dominates investments since 1994. Public investment in its stead is lacking. Post-2015, corruption, energy crisis as seen by Eskom with load shedding, low confidence has caused a slump in the public sector and has seen its ramifications in many communities, such as the large township areas, and of course, also seeing a high confidence and boost into the private sector. Contrasts with the SA's extractive institutions, as I said before, that of the PIC's 3.4 trillion assets unused. Now, I've gone on about the negatives of the South African economy, but what can be some positives that can see us see some growth, not just short-term and medium-term, but long-term for the next 20 years? What can those be? By the way, I'll be about, 40 years old when we see these things. But this is pivotal for the next coming generation of young people to see these growths, to see these improvements in communities. What are the short-term goals for the next we can see these actions for the next 1 to 3 years? Protecting SMEs through credit, mentorship, and fiscal initiatives. Seeing collaborations between that of the Reserve and Treasury, anti-corruption, reform, and strengthening of MPAs, stabilizing of key industries, and energy security to avoid social collapse, such as seen in 2022 here in South Africa with the unrests. What can also be seen is a fragile recovery of 1.5% to 2% growth, which can be very big for the South African economy, not just for vital institutions, but also seeing clear action and mandate rolled out through the public. Medium-term reforms for the next 3 to 7 years, a shift from triple BEE ownership transfer for skills and capability building, leading public investment in green energy, agro processes, and AI sectors, proven by SARS, by the way, who have retrieved billions of debt using AI systems already. So clear investment in there can achieve higher growth as well. Modernizing of infrastructure, our ports, railways, and energy grids is important. A lean towards green energy with our mass water reserves can see massive improvement nationwide. Lastly, long-term transformation for the next 7 to 20 years. Creating constitutional barriers against elite capture has been one of South Africa's biggest struggles. And tackling this head on can see massive improvements, not just in the corridors of parliament and the corridors of the executive, but underlying through to judiciary, legislation, and most importantly, trickling down into improvements into the private sector as an ethical form of business. Aligning SA's growth with SADC and the FCTA industrial corridors, focus on productivity and STEM education, decentralized energy, and advanced logistics. Forecasting for the future. Well, without reform, growth will be stuck at about 2%. With mission-driven investment, potential for 4 to 5% inclusive growth can be achieved. Reimagining state capacity, building from 62% living in the poverty, and not just the privileged in their minority of 3%. In conclusion, it's a call to action as young South Africans. It's a call for action for young and old, as it were, here in the global South. South Africa is at a turning point of stagnation on one hand and inclusive growth on the other. Which do we want? This big question is at the nexus of the South African conversation. Action is needed. Defunding failed SOEs, empowering SMEs, redirecting BEE, and the Mazukatu model being a prevailing front for the South African economy and nation. As it says, the state must lead innovation, not follow markets. Let's build an economy that serves the majority and not just the minority. To quote the Swedish ambassador to South Africa, let us be the first into the new and not the last out of the old. Thank you so much for your time. Ke a leboha.